Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, this is Jessa. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. So glad you are here with me. Got an interesting conversation today. I'm talking to Court Vox, and he is a somatic sex educator and a sex coach. He's talking about this idea of calibration, which is really developing an awareness of touch from the very softest to the most intense, or whatever your experience it is. It doesn't have to be physical. And calibrating, like learning, what's it like to find the sort of yellow zone, what he calls scratchy, where it's almost too much, but you're still enjoying it. It's not too much. And learning to tune into that and to potentially move yourself there. I mean, as a coach, this is what he does with clients, is pushes them a little further than they might go by themselves. But he talks about the value of that sort of yellow, scratchy place. Value in terms of building tension and excitement that could increase your sense of orgasm or the experience of orgasm, but also just the value in life about what's it like to kind of wake up, pay attention, go a little bit further than you would otherwise go. It's really interesting, the parallels between this sex practice that he's got, this coaching approach, and real-world applications. It's interesting. So he's going to describe this whole calibration idea, how you can potentially practice this by yourself or with a partner. And then he's going to share a workshop he's got coming up too. Hope you enjoy it. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So, Court, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Would you mind just sort of introducing yourself a little bit in the nature of your work and what you're doing these days as we start in?
Yes, I will give you the elevator pitch, if you will.
Okay.
My name is Court Vox. I'm a sex and intimacy coach based in Los Angeles, California. I travel extensively all over the US and in other countries teaching. I teach primarily in immersion. So I work with people for 3 up to 8 days at a time, mostly in private retreat. So one-on-one with me. I also work with women and couples with my teaching partner, Pamela Madsen, and work for Back to the Body, sensuous retreats for women. So between those 3 things, I am a very busy man.
What brought you to the work?
Oh, that's the question everybody wants to know. You know, I've always been kind of a sexual human. I remember my first kind of sexual curiosities being very young. My first sexual memory is when I was 4. I used to give my neighbor, who was also 4, we used to give each other blowjobs on the side of my house. And so I have that memory. I also have a memory of wanting to play doctor as much as possible with all my friends. My mother was very open with a lot of things in terms of bodies and talking about sex and masturbation. She was very open about that. Looking back on it, my mom, without knowing, my mom was a somatic before it was a thing. So it's really interesting to kind of look back at my history and see how it's kind of played a huge part in me discovering the work that I do now. But I was in corporate for a really long time, 15, almost 20 years. I worked for Yahoo, and then I worked for a company called Maker Studios, which was acquired by Disney, and then a startup company that was an e-commerce company. And right towards the end of working for Disney, I started to study shibari rope bondage. Really loved it. I continue to study that. It's also something that I offer as an experience for my clients. But I was practicing with a woman who was a psychotherapist, and her kind of focus was the nervous system and how that worked with her. And she said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "Well, I would like to be a sex coach, but not one that just talks to people. I want to be one that like facilitates learning through the body and through touch and through kind of like exercises." And I said, "But I don't think it exists." And she said, "Have you heard of sexological body work?" And I said, "Nope." And immediately I left her house and I looked it up online. And I think within 2 weeks I had signed up for the training, and I spent about 2 years studying somatic sex education. And I also studied and became certified in surrogate partner therapy during that time. So a lot of learning happened in 2.5 years. So that's how I got into it.
Quite the story. Don't you love how people cross our paths right when we need to hear something, right? That's what that makes me think when the woman says, "Have you heard of this?"
Right. It's interesting. I lost contact with her, and I reached out to her to just express my gratitude. And I think she's changed her number. And so,
Well, maybe she'll hear this or some other interview that you do and be able to say, "Wow, I gave somebody exactly the message they needed at that moment."
Yeah.
All right. So let's start with you talk about calibration through sensation. And while I know what those words mean, I don't know if I know what they mean together. So could you talk a little bit about that?
So calibration really is like, it's an important piece of touch. I think that it's a nuance of touch that people are missing. I just came out of a retreat with Pamela Manson and Kenneth Play, and this was a really big piece of our work with this client, which was calibration. Calibration is starting somewhere with touch. And sometimes this can be genital touch, but also can be touch anywhere in the body, and kind of seeing where the lowest point of sensation is. And then also finding the threshold for that touch that's like just a little bit at the edge of discomfort. And then calibrating somewhere down a little bit so that the body is actually pushing its limits of the sensation that it's used to, but it's not going over the top where the body goes into more of like a shock response. This is particularly interesting when it comes to clitoral stimulation. And I would say just as equal as it is with cock touch and cock play is to kind of understand the sensitivity of the clitoris and the sensitivity of the head of the penis, and kind of calibrating where that edge of pleasure is, but that edge that can bring it to the next level. The interesting thing about calibration too is that you could be in that place for a second or a minute or 2 minutes, and then the body will get used to it. And so it's almost like you have to up the ante again, find a different stroke or a different technique that will push the limits of that person again in a comfortable and uncomfortable way, if that makes sense.
So you're saying start with the sort of the lightest touch that somebody can feel, but that it sounds like you're saying playing or being right below the level of discomfort is somehow more there's some reason to play right there as opposed to the low end of the touch?
Well, you wouldn't start with that discomfort touch first. It would be too jolting for the body. So
yeah.
It's like starting with that really light touch in the beginning to kind of warm up the body. And then once the body is warmed up enough, going to like testing, how is this? How is this? Getting right up to that edge of like, oh, no, I don't like that. Oh, go away. And then tapering it down a little bit. How about this? Yes, that's still a little scratchy, but I like it. I want to stay here. Right. And so staying in that kind of, it's like a sweet spot. We would call it like a yellow place, which is a little uncomfortable, but there's something kind of exciting about it. And then as the body gets used to it, taking it up a notch, right? You might go back to that place that was originally very sensitive and too much. That might be like the sweet spot now.
Right.
It's really just like up leveling every time, and this is like a metaphor for life too, right? As we are bombarded by sensation daily and our lives change, we might have more resources, we might have more access to funds, and we're kind of not seeing what we used to see. Our body and our lifestyle becomes used to, or it has calibrated to the place that we're in now. And so it's almost like, how do we up level that? And so calibration is a really interesting piece to discover and be curious about just within the body. But, so much of the work that I do and we do is when you tap into these places of your eroticism and sexuality, they have so much, there's a byproduct that translates into other pieces of your life as well. And this is a big reason why Pamela Madsen and I started Squirm, which is a sensation toy company, so that instead of like dildos and insertables, and there's tons of those on the market, and there's a lot of great products there, we wanted to create something that people could really use with themselves or with a partner that was outer play, right? That created more of a diverse sensation in the entire body. Because what we know is when the entire body is stimulated from head to toe in different ways, the orgasm that you're capable of having becomes that much bigger. And even if you don't include orgasm, the sensation practice in its own is pretty remarkable.
So listening to you, partly I'm thinking, if you're going to attune that carefully to calibration, part of what that's doing is bringing you very, very present, like what does this actually feel like, as opposed to sort of autopilot, which I think people get on, right?
Thank you for naming that. Yeah, I think when sensation is peak sensation or something that's a new sensation, even if it's something you felt before, but in that moment it's new, yes, your presence and your awareness of what's happening on your skin or just in the room is really focused. And that's a beautiful thing, right? To be able to be focused and aware of what's going on, as opposed to creating a laundry list of things you're supposed to do and dissociating with what's going on in the body.
Yeah. So it sounds like in some ways, this is the most intense stimulation that someone could not tolerate. That's the wrong word, but like it's about intensity. But are you saying there's also some value in being slightly outside of your comfort zone? Like you said, the yellow.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in being slightly outside your comfort zone. If it's a place that feels like an absolute no, or it doesn't feel safe, that's not a place that you should be kind of discovering or going to. But if there's this kind of curiosity of this feels a little bit, I like the word scratchy. It feels scratchy, whether in sensation or actual pursuit of something that's not in the body, right? This could be a life thing. You're really wanting to start a business and it feels absolutely scratchy and you still want to do it. You still want to pursue it. Or you want to rectify a relationship in your life and it feels incredibly scratchy and tender and you still want to do it, right? There's like a yellow, we call that a yellow place, or something that's slightly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But what's true about that is there's a lot of growth there for people.
Right.
There's a lot of growth personally, and there's a lot of growth that can happen in terms of the body itself. And the pleasure potential in all the ways is very big, right? To push yourself and to have someone like me or a coach that's helping you kind of push just a little outside of your comfort zone. It's like going to a personal trainer, right? Your personal trainer is not going to be doing what you do every day.
Yeah, they're going to work you a little bit harder. Right. Yeah.
And if they do, you're probably going to let them go. But you're not going to see results. You're just going to keep doing the same thing. So it's similar. It's like, as a coach, it's like taking people a little bit outside their comfort zone and asking them to, again, calibrate with me to, where are you right now? Mm-hmm. Is this still uncomfortable for you? No. All right, let's take it a step further even. Are you willing to go there now? Actually, I'm not ready to go there right now. Perfect. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Or yes, I would like you to take me a little bit further. Can we push? So again, it's a lot about conversation. It's not something that I'm just kind of like magicianing, right?
Yes.
It's definitely something that I'm doing, and then also having a conversation with that person about, because without them, I don't know what's going on. How can you calibrate without the feedback?
Right. Are there ways that people could do this just with their partner at home? I mean, curious about this idea, and how might a couple practice this, or somebody even with their own solo play?
I think it's definitely something you can do as both. You can do it in your solo play. I think having a partner to do it with, you're kind of enlisting someone to hold you accountable, and also really like holding yourself accountable. Like, you know where your comfort lies, and you know when there's a little discomfort and what feels edgy. And so, if that's the intention for the exercise or the intention of the quote unquote work that you're doing with your partner, I hate that word work, right?
Yeah.
Or play. Let's use play. Yeah. If that's the intention behind the play with your partner, then hold yourselves accountable. Hey, that's too much like what we're used to.
Yeah.
Can you, try something different? Can you take it up a notch?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of play with a partner can be really valuable, not just from a sensation perspective, but from a communication perspective as well.
Yeah. Going to take just a short little break to let you know about a new online course that I've got available called The Desire Spa. This is for women who are in an otherwise happy relationship but are struggling with sexual desire. This is a course just for you to figure out what is in the way of your desire, how to tune in and connect with what you could actually enjoy about physical intimacy, how to deal with all of this with your partner to totally transform your sex life. So it can be something you look forward to. And basically, it can just be one more great part of your relationship with your partner instead of this thing that drags you down. The first step would be to sign up for my free masterclass at intimacywithEase.com/masterclass. It'll talk about how to want sex again and lead into the next steps if you are interested in joining me in the spa. Back to the show. So you've mentioned that you do shibari rope with clients. You're talking about this calibration. And I'm wondering how much of your work with clients is about pushing them a little bit. I mean, in a very positive way, out of their comfort zone into some sort of new level of experience. And what are the other ways in which you do that?
Just if we're going to stay on the topic of sensation has a really broad range, right? You can start from feather-light touch, feather-light sensation, all the way to something that's very impactful, and everything in between, things that are scratchy, things that feel a little dangerous. One of the products that Squirm has, it's our first product, which is their fur gloves and claws. I have some with me here. I can show you.
We'll have to describe them for the listeners.
Oh, that's right. Well, you can see them.
Yes.
They're like, you put them on your fingers and they're very sharp, but the sensation that it brings in the body is almost like electricity, and you can follow it. You can follow the sensation as it goes down your arm. And with the fur is this very soft, kind of sensual, and then you add these claws and it's like something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have like the dichotomy of sensations, which can be really interesting too. I got off on a tangent. I don't know what we were talking about.
Well, I'm curious about like the various practices you've got or ways you've got to give people really new experiences that maybe push them a little bit, take them out of what they're used to. It sounds like that's at least, some component of the work you do as a coach.
Definitely. I'd like to say, I want you to be in your yellow space. In talking about what that means, it's like in a green space, it's like, this feels easy. This feels, like drinking my coffee in the morning, or something that's, chill or relaxing. And red would be something that's just like an absolute no, I'm not going there, such huge resistance. And then the yellow is something where there's like I want to put my toe in the water. I'm curious, but I've never done it before. And I'm a little bit nervous. I like the word nearsighted. It's like nervous.
Nearsighted. I like that.
Nervous and excited.
Yeah.
That is a space that I like to keep my clients in. How I do that really depends on the client I'm working with. It could be somebody that's really uncomfortable with fantasy exploration, or has never spoken their fantasies or written their fantasies. And so having someone write a fantasy on a piece of paper and read it out loud could be incredibly edgy for them.
Right.
And yellow. And then exploring it together could be really yellow. And so that's an example of something that maybe it's a little more psychological. When we're talking about sensation, somebody might have a lot of curiosity or not even know that impact play or impact sensation is something that they enjoy, because it's associated with BDSM, which for a lot of people is really scary. And so kind of taking that narrative away and saying, okay, well, what if we can just think about this sensation as a deeper sensation? Can we think about it like that? And what if you enjoy that? And a lot of times people do. People do enjoy a deeper sensation, whether that's, pressure, pressure with hands, or it's, pressure with something like a Theragun, or using impact from a flog or a twitch, and just kind of exploring all the sensations that are available. Oftentimes people are surprised at not only what they enjoy, but how much they can take.
Yeah. And I imagine you're calibrating that too, right? Like, let's work up slowly and see where we get up there.
Exactly. We're not starting, if somebody is asking to be spanked or flogged, we're not starting right out the gate with the hardest version of that.
Right.
It's like, how is this? Would you like more? Yes, I would like more impact. Okay. How about that? And then it gets to the point where they're like, no, that's it. That's all I can take right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a perfect example of calibration of sensation. But I do think it's often surprising to people of what they enjoy and also how much of it their body can handle.
And you mentioned before a little bit about orgasm intensity. How does this relate? How does calibration through sensation correlate with, the experience of orgasm?
Well, if you think about orgasm as a tension and release, right? You think about building tons of tension in the body over time, right? It's a tease, right? You're teasing the body. And that calibration can look like starting with feathers or starting with a narrative that's soft and really building that sensation or the narrative to something that feels a little bit more intense. And also calibrating down, tapering down. And so I'm going to use the word edging, right? So taking somebody to the peak of something and then saying, okay, we're not going there quite yet, and going back down and starting, maybe not from the beginning, but starting from a 5 instead of a 1.
Yeah.
And heading back up to a 9. And then when we get to that 9, we bring it back to like a 6. And so we're slowly but surely building. And as we're building all of that in the body, there's an immense amount of energy running. And it's energy that's cultivated not just from your genitals up, but from, depending on what we're exploring, if we're including narrative, we're including fantasy and words and sound, it could be something that really is like a more of a top-down approach, right? So when we're incorporating both, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of energy simulated in the body. And so when that release finally does happen, it has the potential to be very big.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this, because I've interviewed a few different sex coaches or somatic body workers, sexological body workers on the podcast. And a lot of the focus has been working with trauma survivors, which seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but seems like a different thing than what you're describing. Like, do you consider what you're talking about here with calibration and, these yellow experiences, is that suitable for somebody who's just dealing with their trauma? Or is this more like I don't want to say advanced, but is this something people would do some initial trauma work first, and then maybe this is something they'd explore?
It depends. It's interesting you say that. I don't think I'm a traditional somatic sex educator or a traditional sexological body worker. I pull from those modalities, but I also pull from BDSM. I pull from Tantra. I pull from my work as a surrogate. So there's a lot of different modalities that I'm taking from to coach my clients. I work with clients that have experienced trauma in like a various range. Some clients, that's not the right approach, right?
Yeah.
For a client who's had a ton of sexual trauma, for example, and they haven't had a lot of positive reinforced touch, there needs to be so many steps. But just going back to calibration, it is about calibration. We're just starting really slowly.
Yeah.
I might start with somebody just touching their hand. And that's often how I start, is touching their hand to understand what their language is with touch. If I'm touching someone's hand and I say, how does that feel? Good. Feels nice. Feels fine. Can you say more about that? Well, it feels good. Nice. Fine. We're not going to be moving on quite yet, because the language around touch and how they are perceiving that touch, there's, and this is something I have to gauge when I'm with someone, but the probability that they're disassociating is quite large. And so to bring somebody into a session where we're doing all this stuff like they're not even going to be there. And
Right.
there's such potential for harm in that capacity. And so
Right.
sometimes it is calibrating way, way, way down. I would say those types of clients, though, I'm working more as a surrogate. The type of clients that come to see me, I think, in my coaching work, there have been clients that have experienced trauma of some sort, and everyone has experienced trauma
Yeah.
of some
Right.
kind. I don't tend to focus on the traumatic experience itself. I focus on what's in front of us. How can we pursue your intentions for being here? How can we pursue the pleasure aspects of this? The trauma will come up on its own.
Right. Because it does seem to me, if you're doing the calibration work, if you're trying to figure out the yellow, it rests on somebody's ability to understand where they are and what the reaction is to it and their ability to communicate that. Right. So,
and also like your yellow might be incredibly different than my yellow.
Right.
And so it's a really personal approach to working with people. And again, a lot of the clients that come work with me, I would say 90% are seeing a therapist, have done a lot of cognitive therapy, have had psychotherapy around their trauma. And to be honest, I think talk therapy is really valuable. And then it gets to a point where it's like, man, I've been talking about this experience, this story for the last 10 years. And like, my body's doing the same thing.
Right. Right.
Like, how long am I going to tell this story? Like, can I rewrite the story a little bit? And oftentimes as a culture, we think about trauma as the experience that happened. I was raped. I was molested. I was in a car accident. But the approach that we take is more of trauma is what's been stored in the body. And so that experience is over, but the remnants of it are held in the cellular level of your body and in your nervous system. And so when I talk about working with somebody who has an immense amount of trauma to the point where they're dissociating, it's really about rewiring their nervous system to associate touch, sensual touch, erotic touch with pleasure as opposed to harm.
Right.
And that's not something that you can rush.
Right.
It's something, when I've worked as a surrogate, that's something that I have spent months on, and the biggest question I get asked around surrogacy is, do you have sex with them? Which is such an off-putting question because it just disrespects the entire process of the work, which I could be touching this person's hand literally for 3 months to develop a language where it's gone from that feels good, that feels fine, that feels nice to it feels sensual, that feels nurturing, that feels incredible. I would like more, please. Where they're actually like you were saying before, present with the sensation and aware of how it's running through their body. That's a really important piece that often gets overlooked because it's not that exciting.
So segue for me, if you would. I know you want to talk a little bit about the men's workshop that you're offering or will be offering. And let's talk specifically about how some of this applies to men and then what you're going to be doing in these workshops.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to be doing a 2.5, 3-day workshop in Los Angeles, the first weekend of March in 2022. When I set out to start my company a little over 2 years ago, I really wanted to create alternative spaces specifically for queer men. I don't want to replace what have been traditionally beautiful watering holes, bars, clubs, restaurants, back alleys, bushes, wherever it is, queer men have had to go to find sex with each other, to find community with each other. I really want to put an emphasis on valuing those spaces. And I also feel like we're in a time where we're shifting a little bit. And I would say that for queer men in particular, sex is available. It is just available always between the apps and the different places that people are congregating. It's available. I think what's missing is intimacy and connection. And I think there is a true longing for that. There's a longing for a deeper sense of community that is not centered around drugs and alcohol and, dark spaces. And so kind of like acknowledging that those spaces have been very good to us and will continue to be. You will see me in those places too. And also acknowledging that I would like to create and I would like to be in more heart-centered spaces, in more spaces where I can know people's names and maybe what their favorite color is, or where they grew up, or issues they're having with their family. It's been kind of incredible since I've announced to the world that I'm doing this work, just how many men have confided in me with things that are, I would say, important, right? It's not what they're wearing or who they're dating. It's like very intimate nuggets of their life, of things they experienced when they were younger, or the amount of men who have come out and said that they have been molested or taken advantage in some kind of way was surprising to me. There's a statistic that 1 in 6 men have been sexually mistreated or molested in some way. And that number is probably larger just because of the stigma around talking about it.
Yeah.
Some of the men that have come out to me, I'm one of very few people that they've told. So that feels like a really huge honor. And it feels like something that I want to work with a little bit in terms of offering other spaces for people to congregate and learn in and connect in. And so this workshop is aptly titled Beyond the Circuit. And that's what I intend to do. I intend to create a safe enough space for people to be vulnerable, to be intimate with each other, and to learn in an embodied way. So something that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Where do people find you? Where do they get information about this workshop and the other kind of things you have to offer?
So all of my everything, all of my everything is on my website. So www.thebodyvox.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Court Vox. I write 1 to 3 pieces a week. So even if you can't come see me because of where you're located or money or schedule, there's a lot of learning just in the readings for a lot of people. And then in terms of Squirm, which is my product with Pamela Madsen, we're actually going to be launching that in November. And that will be at everybodysquirm.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, thank you. It's been so fun.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.